We got a quick community dinner story tonight. This is, oh God, January 6th.
Yes, Epiphany.
January 6th, full moon, right? Or there's a full moon cycle right now. And so, apologies, I haven't been posting in a while. I had a YouTube strike, and so I don't want to say too much about that because probably get a second strike just for talking about it. So, Jesus. So the theme that was sort of advertised in my email newsletter was sort of food stories. And so the one that popped in tonight, it's like, I never really know sometimes what I'm going to say. And I just kind of like throw the theme out there and then wait for the
inspiration.
Well, it's sort of like an angel.
Start winging it.
It's sort of like angel calling is what I'm calling it now. And that's what it feels like. And I just got done reading John Dee and the Empire of Angels. And I understand Aleister Crowley now in a different light, seeing his early life through this book, like, because Crowley was using John Dee's work. And so just, wow, I thought this guy was like the beast, really evil. Because I'm a seeker of what are the natural laws. And so I'm leading this natural law group, which is starting next Tuesday. And one of the things that got me started on my journey was this story of, I drove across the country in 1996, April of 96. I had a Nissan pickup with a camper shell, and I was going out to Beckett, Massachusetts from Santa Cruz, California. And I drove down to Southern California and surfed in Ventura, was my last surf in California. And then I went like east through Arizona. And long story short, that whole journey was, I don't even know, like, my truck was not running well, and there was a carburetor, just a couple of issues that I sputtered through New Mexico. And this was like middle of April, and I ran into a blizzard in the middle of New Mexico in a sputtering truck. And I mean, you just can't make this shit up. I don't even know how I survived. I had to pull over, and like a foot of snow, and I'm like, somehow I just prayed, like, please get me through these mountains down into Arkansas or wherever I can stop. And but so I get there, and let's see, 1996. I'm 31 years old, kind of wide-eyed utopian optimist at my core. And I wanted to see the utopian ideals in Beckett, Massachusetts with the macrobiotic masters, So I got my bachelor's degree, or my second bachelor's degree in nutrition at Cal Poly. And, I had been complimented on what a great chef I was. I opened a macrobiotic restaurant. And I was feeling pretty high, I'm cocky. And 10 years earlier, I had broken my neck for the same reason. So, there was a crash coming. What I call the God hammers, like, getting a little cocky. So the drive was part of it. It was just, travel is a humbling experience, as we all know. And a bunch of people stepped up and helped me get to where I finally was able to get the truck fixed. And was in a parking lot in Little Rock, Arkansas, this car parts store. The clerk there just helped me, and there was just a couple of like spark plug cables, and you just can't make the shit. It was so simple and yet retarded. So, and I worked my way up the East Coast, and I wanted to surf in North Carolina, but that's another story. So I get there, and there was just really the daffodils were coming up, because it was still snow on the ground when I got there in late April. This was like a 10-day journey. It took me to get across the United States and then up the East Coast. I kind of went the deluxe long route. And so fast forward a month when the flowers started coming up, and they had these two rows of peonies. There was a row of white peonies and red peonies. And if you've ever seen a peony, it's like a complex rose on steroids. I mean, I've never seen such a complex pattern in a flower, except for these Afghanistan opium poppies I've got. And I'm not supposed to say that. Whatever. I grow them for looks. And so I was looking at this garden, and there was like a mansion over here on the let's see, the sunrise, the east side of the property. And then there's this walkway, and then there's another huge, beautiful building. These are old, like probably built in the 1870s or 80s, and have been restored a number of times, it looks like. And there was this big old garden area, and there was a comfrey plant that was 6 feet in diameter around it. Wow. It was a mound. And so fast forward to the guy, the gardener, who is the gardener here? I'm thinking, right. like pulling, like, wow. Because I had just kind of started I was finishing up my herbal medicine career, but I was young. I didn't, I always just jumped right into shit and then sort of like learn as you go kind of shit. And I mean, that's what I was teaching at this point. And I was barely out of school because one of my teachers says, you learn what you teach. So go teach something more about it. So I was the ballsy dude that would just jump out and do it. So there I am. I finally met this old crotchety Japanese gardener dude. And but he had the eye thing. He had that. I mean, he had the eyes of a man who had seen a lot of good shit in nature. Like I trusted him inherently immediately, because this is a multi-million-dollar facility up in Beckett, Massachusetts. And it had been in the Kushi. So it was the Kushi Institute. So the Kushis had gotten it. Let's see. It had maybe been at that point in 96. They might have had it 30, 40, 50 years by that point. I don't know how long, but beautiful old facility. Some of the locals told me the history of the place before the Kushis got it. But this guy said, this comfrey plant here. He said, I was curious when I got here. We must have been like 20 years earlier. He said, it was a little smaller than it is now. And I went and dug down. I got down about 8 to 10 feet. And he says, there's no hope of finding the roots. And he went down like 8 to 10 feet. So comfrey, in permaculture, at the minimum, is used as the plant they use for a lot of mulch. So you can imagine how deep those roots went, how much minerals it's pulling up from the earth and making these leaves with, and it's great mulch. But the reason why the plant got so large, one of the first inspiring things I learned about comfrey is that it's in the herbal tarot deck, it's the world. The comfrey's the world card. Yeah, and the fact that comfrey has a compound in it called allantoine that's very similar to urea, which is very similar to urine, which is a growth tissue accelerant. It accelerates tissue growth. That's why the Indians called it knit bone. And so it's very anabolic in medical terms. It causes rapid growth. I took it every day for 4 years because the FDA said it's going to kill you.
Shocker.
I was warned by my teacher, Tiara. Tiara said, you're going to sell this FDA bullshit. So what they did was they isolated this compound that is in it called a pyridosylene alkaloid, and it is toxic, and other plants have it, and it depends on the soil it's grown in. But what they do is they fed some rats some ridiculous amount of comfrey, like the equivalent of 1,000 pounds of comfrey with a certain amount of and then the rats died of liver cancer. So they inferred based on that comfrey would give you liver cancer, and that's what's published on the web. It's all horse shit, literally. I'm proud to say that, because I needed to heal my gut lining because I had allergies, and I knew that the secret was I had to get the house cleaned out down there. So I got the garden cleaned out, but I'm a sensitive type, and so you need protein and vitamin C to rebuild the gut lining, but you also got to get your emotions in check, and you got to know how to rebuild that shit. So what I realized was, well, I can take this stuff internally. I can juice the leaves in the summer. I can drink the root tea in the winter. And so what happened was, I wasn't every day for 4 years, but I was pretty religious. I probably missed a day of the week or two at the most. And I gained 10 pounds. My allergies went away, and my digestion, I wasn't perfect with my diet yet at that point, but mostly I was there at that point. And I'm proud to say that, I went through some fear. I'm inherently suspicious of everything. So that's why I went and did it. It's like, this is a test tube, and that's how I always viewed this thing. So the inspiring part about this story was not done yet. The Japanese gardener dude introduced me to a food so at this place, you're in New England, and they actually have a root cellar, and they make miso, they make tempeh, they make tofu, they make amazake, they make seitan, They make something called foo from the leftover seitan flour water. Let's see what else. So there's a lot of stuff we were making from hand. So I got to make tofu, I got to make tempeh, got to make amasaki. I didn't get to make umabashi plum, but I got a book on that and really understood that. And then saw some moldy miso and they down in the root cellar. I'm like, oh, you're gonna still use that? And he just scraped off the mold and maybe put it in with a compost, I think, I'll put it in with compost, So they had this fermented thing. This was 96. So I consider myself a pioneer kind of fermenter. And so this was part of the pioneering part was this guy had this stuff called natto. And it's just natto. You probably hear about the natto kinase or the natto enzyme stuff, but the real natto is a fermented soybean product that smells like Limburger cheese at best. Horrendous smell. So what they do is they kind of half cook. I think it's you soak the soybeans and you barely cook them. Then you put this, you culture them in this culture, and I think it's a fungal bacterial symbiote. Not quite remembering. And what it does is it breaks down the soybean to more simpler amino acids from the complex proteins. And so you can imagine this as these big molecules being broken down to more simple digestible molecules. And in that process, there's these proteins that are sort of produced and released as the chains break down. And the unfortunate byproduct is, well, some protein chains have sulfur in them. Cysteine, methionine, and what's that third one? Isoleucine. So that's the advanced stuff, Monica. We're learning nutrition. You got to know the amino acids. So some of them have sulfur. That's why the chosen ones, kind of digressing. I was hoping to keep this short, but I promise I will. The chosen ones, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen make up most of life. And so, but proteins don't have to have the S, the sulfur. So chon, CHON, makes up other proteins. And if you look at those, that's the start of nutrition right there. And a lot of people don't realize that this one chemistry teacher talks about this as chemistry as God's love manifest in molecules. David Stewart, his book, The Chemistry of Essential Oils, subtitle, God's love manifest in molecules. This is the best chemistry book ever made. And I have a chemistry course I'm teaching on February 8th because I think that chemistry needs to be taught from this point of view, which is our cells aren't reading the CD4-5 receptor. Our cells are reading frequencies and energies.
Yeah.
It's agreed upon construct called chemistry that's not true. We can use the tool, but let's not worship the false idol, folks. So what I teach is chemistry as a process. It's like, is a photograph of you running a race, in fact, you running the race? No, that would be insane to say that. That's what we're inferring way too much from chemistry. And so being back at this institute, back to the Japanese gardener, this natto stuff, it's like life, and so the sulfur compound had been released as the protein chains are breaking down. So it smells like, Limburger, sulfur. It's sticky and slimy, like gum. It pulls apart all, and it stinks. And so this Japanese gardener has a bowl that's it's about twice the size of this here, and it's mostly full of it. And then he's got this really chunky mustard, like a yellow mustard, on top. So to add to the stink, he's got sour, spicy mustard on it also. And I'm just mortified. I'm looking at this going, this is your breakfast? I was doing the miso soup, soft rice thing, and veggies. And he's like, yeah. And so I just sat and just kind of watched him in fascination as I had the rice. And I was just like, you really like that? He goes, yeah. I grew accustomed to it. I ate it at a young age, and he was an old, probably 70s, 80s, and I was curious, and so I said, "Give me a bite of that." And so he gave me like a quarter teaspoon at most, and And it was like, it took every ounce of willpower to shove that thing in my mouth because every part of me was saying, don't do it because it smelled so bad. But he was my example. He was eating it. I would never have done it without him sitting there in front of me enjoying it, right? It's kind of like the dog that doesn't want to eat, and you eat it years from the dog. Okay, I can eat it now. And so I was like the dog, and I can finally trust this guy. And then I ate it, and I even had a little thing of mustard on it too. I had a little dollop of mustard on this tiny little piece. And it was like, you shove it down and sort of swallow it. It's like, okay, I'm not going to live. And he laughed and he said, well, now you're inoculated. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, if you continue to eat it, you'll want more and more because the microbes will, start making their home down there. And so I did experiment with it. Every day I had a little more. And over the course of a few weeks, I worked up to like this capful right here. And I have a little mustard on it. And once or twice a week, and it, I can honestly say that he was right. I did start to crave it.
Yeah.
And, but I would never have brought it with me. So there's an enzyme in that lowers cholesterol and plaque in the arteries, it turns out. And they've isolated this natto kinase enzyme from this stinky natto, it turns out. So you get the benefit of it without having to eat the stinky natto. And the last part of this story I'll just share of this institute was this man, the gardener guy had one last story about him. He hit all the squashes, the big, they had these, they called them Hokkaido pumpkins or kabocha, they call them now.
Yeah.
And he had
the Japanese pumpkin.
Yeah, the big green, gnarly. I mean, they were hundreds of them, and I had them all curing in the sun. So he said, if you don't cure them, they don't get sweet. So he knew just how to cure them, like when I guess when the center stem would dry and you could break it off easy, I guess that's when they were ready, was his method. And so I learned that from him. And I always remember, like, if I was going to grow squashes, to make sure I put them in the sun and cure after you pick them, or leave them on the vine when the vine dies. And that's why the pumpkins are out there in the field, right? When the vine dies.
Yeah.
They're curing. And so a lot of little tricks and secrets I learned in these, it's about 7 months I was out there. And this guy inspired me because there was another man, that Lee Osbaldiston. If you see my Facebook page, he's the one hugging the sequoia tree, and he hadn't died yet, but he was gonna die the next year, I think. And so there's these people in my life, these men, and in particular, like to your point, is I joined my first men's group that same year in 1996 that I went back east. Because I had a few men that were like, these guys are, Tierra I thought of as a worthy male role model in a lot of ways. I saw him make people cry, some vegan young ladies, because he was brutally direct and, and manipulative too. But I've been a good manipulator myself, so I have to own my own part of that. And so there was one other thing I did on this trip that is worthy. It's not a health story, but it's for those of you that really like push the edge. So I had read Carlos Castaneda, enough of the book series, 4 or 5 of them, and seen Star Wars, and knew there was this thing called the Force. Okay, I'll just say. And 10 years earlier, I had survived a broken neck where the doctors couldn't believe I was alive. So I knew there must be some weird thing going on that they call the Force or something. So in Castaneda's world, there was this thing where you could run in the forest, and there was a special way of running. I don't remember what it was called. And it was a complete darkness, was in one of the books. And so I was like, so here I am in the East Coast. There's a night where I was given instructions by my angels to take my mountain bike from the top of this mountain and ride down this 2-lane road in pitch black, no moon, to a lake below, and jump in the lake and christen myself on this new moon with no benefit of flashlights or lights, and to find my way somehow through the forest from the road to the lake. And I did it.
Wow.
I wrote a 10-page story about it in my, I'll just call my autobiography, but and it's like, we all have callings. Like, Eric, that's one of the reasons why I told you I really honor and respect you as a lot of us, this being a recorded piece, is a lot of us fail to take notice of what I'll just say higher values. And Bernard Jensen, one of my favorite health teachers, said, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so Suzuki Roshi said, the most important thing is to know the most important thing. So that's what I spent my life doing, is learning the most important things. That's why I'm sitting here telling you at age 57, I can still surf every day if I want, and so to me, when I was a young man, speaking of the young crowd, is, I spent my youth, I spent it well, like, went and traveled and I learned shit and I used that energy, that chi, to develop myself and not tear myself down and waste myself. Like I saw so many people in my Santa Cruz surf crowd do. They were the surf god teenagers and all the idolatry and big fat ego and then over drinking. And, it's like, if you don't do the work, let's not call it work. If you don't do the exploration, try to avoid that word work. We do a lot in the mankind, but I'm gonna go do some work. It's like, no, fuck that.
Yeah. It's for me, it feels more comfortable and easy to say I'm exploring the mysteries of life than doing the work through life.
Right. And so, like, if you're watching this recording, which, we get sometimes 20, 30 people will watch these, is, why people come and watch Craig? And one of the reasons is because I know that when I disappear and there's a voice that I'm sort of responding to versus dictating from, that's why you watch this, is because that's truth talking through a human being. And that's why I listen to Eric, because I know that there's truth coming in at me from another human being, and Monica and Donna, it's like, the Zen metaphor for master student, I just says, is two arrows meeting, meaning the extinguishment of each. There's only one, like the namaste thing in yoga. When you and I are in that place of centeredness, there's only one of us. Let thine eye be single. There's so many pointers in different traditions. That's why, if you're watching this recording, natural law, folks, join the natural law group, because there's 6 testimonials on the website also of awareness is the peace. And if you gain awareness, then you're given freedom. But without awareness, you're in the hologram. You're in instinct and trigger. And that's what growth is, because there's more sensitivity being open. That's what I avoided responsibility, I'll be the first to say, for maybe 2 decades. I saw what was like. Responsibility.
What did that look like to you in terms of avoidance?
For
the 20 years.
Overwork, oversurf, overstudy, oversleep, overeat were my avoidance mechanisms. Oversex. It was like everything to excess, including rest. So I'm one of those people, like, if I'm not centered on what I'm doing, so my adaptive mechanism was just to compartmentalize something like, this is being recorded, but we were on this earlier, folks, and I was raped my first sexual experience at age 14, so I know what that feels like too. It was more of a betrayal than it was like a violent episode or anything. But to the point earlier of, when we overcome difficulties, that's growth. And the Khalil Gibran piece on love, I believe, is one of the most truest pieces about love, because if you want to really be in love, then you have to have the part of love that sheds a tear and tears you down and strips you naked. And if you're not willing to feel all that, then, as they put in the poem, the piece, then you'll feel part of life, but not all of life. And that's fine. But I was never going to be that person. Like enlightenment, I had to know what enlightenment was for me. So 14 years from my experience at age 25, my God experience, to 39, I was grinding it out in silence. So I had to know for myself. I was not going to take any book, anybody's word for it, even though I read 1,000 stories of enlightenment, try to make a science out of it. You probably, and I'm going to be enlightened, and then my ego is going to be all cleared up, and I'm going to be normal, and my trauma is going to go away. And oh boy.
Yeah.
That's why they say before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. That's why they say that. But you got to see it for yourself. So, you know, if you're watching this, when you overcome stuff, then there's growth. And emotionally, especially for a man, like it used to take me years to figure shit out emotionally. And now I'm down to proudly enough to say sometimes seconds. Not all the time, but you know, and to me, that's fluidity, which I have a video about this on my YouTube channel about one of the markers of higher health is you're emotionally and mentally fluid. You're not stuck in regret and doubts. You're not tethered to the past. You're not bound by future anxieties. You're living in the now. That's a high marker of health. And you get, I mean, everything's a pinball in today's world. You know, you got to take your shots and keep surfing life. And so the example of my story back east, and you know, Eric had some stories earlier, and to me, the point of stories is this is the fire that we used to sit around. Unfortunately, it's a device, but we used to sit around the fire and tell each other stories at night and play music and dancing and all that. So this has replaced that for now, but my family are the Lanes, who were the McLanes, who were the innkeepers who had the entertainment back in the day before there was television. So I'm a natural. I'm set up on my father's side to be the orator. So this is my gift to you, and that's my wish for anybody watching this, is that to find your purpose. Because my life is easy because I know my purpose, and I get distracted and I fall back on my purpose. I get distracted and back to my purpose. That's my tether. That's why I didn't, like, you know, despite 35 years of suicidal ideations, they were irrelevant because I wasn't going to do it. Why? Because I'm tethered to my mission. I'm given my word that I'm going to finish it. And, you know, Eric understands this. Like, that's why I like that Jamie Fraser guy in Outlander, because, you know, my word's gold. You know, I give my word, you know, whew, it's gold. I'm not going to break it under any circumstances.
Right. And not only, you know, when I like the idea of you speaking about being your word, because for me, it means that there's fluidity in that, but also the capacity to be better and be a leader in any given moment.
And that's why there are people that I surround myself with that are not going to allow me to dumb myself down, because I'll get that reflection pretty quick. Like, hey, Craig, that was pretty shady over there, you know.
Yeah.
I got over caffeinated a number of years ago after a breakup because I was using the caffeine to disassociate. And 3 or 4 people like, dude, you're out of line. You're irritable, defensive. And turns out I didn't really know, but I went down and did the measurements. I was doing the equivalent of over 20 grams of pu'er tea a day.
Oh,
psycho, dude.
Holy sheesh.
When I figured it out, I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, I was going like 20 cups of tea. Because most tea bags are a gram.
Right.
So I was like, I was doing 20 cups of black tea a day.
Wow, man. Was your heart like just like your whole chest just pumping? That's crazy. Man.
Well, my excuse was it's pu'er. I'm only steeping it for like 10 seconds. You know, it was a real quick steep. So
yeah, but I mean, still. It's funny you bring up the caffeine piece.
Rationalizing mind, you know. I got a real good, you know, I could convince myself or out of, you know how it is. I got
of course.
A rationalizer. Like, oh, I'm only steeping it for 15 seconds. I'm adding cream. I'm fixing it up real good.
I make a cup of coffee every morning and I mostly enjoy the smell.
Right.
Yeah.
And I take like 2 or 3 sips and I just leave it sit there because instantaneously I feel that jolt of caffeine. And admittedly, like, I'm not a speed guy. I can't handle that stuff. It spins me out and then forget it. Like I'm done, man. Like I can't do it. Seriously, I drank a yerba mate this afternoon and I'll probably be up until like 2 or 3 this morning because I won't be able to sleep. I'm all wired and it doesn't work for me.
You should
So
try
for you to
what I learned is if I use decaf, real what's it called, where everybody gets paid right, certified that it's it's everybody along the food chain of making it. It's better. It's higher quality. I call it getting. I can't stand the feeling of coffee if there's any jacking up, but
Yeah.
I love the smell like you, and I love the flavor
Yeah.
when it's creamy and not, going to do that to me.
Yeah.
So you might find.
And I used to use caffeine in for vasodilation, 3 to 5 milligrams or whatever, for vasodilation. Always felt good for me for better adequate blood flow, but still left me with that jitteriness. Is like, this sucks, because then I'm in my head in trying to resolve that experience, which takes me out of feeling like my goal of doing. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can explain that correct, but that's
One teacher called it wearing too many hats, because you've made one. It's like taking a drug and you need a drug for the side effect and another side effect of the drug. Yeah. So because it's being recorded, I kind of wanted to button that up real quick.
yeah.
Is it feel closure on that part of it?
No, I complete with it.
You feel complete? Okay.
I do. Thank you.
Really, if you're watching this, the point of like inspire, we have like, there's all that, that you're a conspiracy theorist, but the word conspire versus inspire, look those up in the dictionary and you'll find some interesting, definitions in the olden days of these words, like to breathe in, inspire.
Yeah.
Conspire, doesn't con mean with spire. So when you're conspiring, that word has a lot of connotations, doesn't it? To conspire, conspiracy. So there's a, just look at the state of the world, and this, to me, this is my offering to what's real. And I'm going to remind everybody that your solution for vitamin C are always fresh plants, and always fresh plants, and raw cow adrenals too. But most of us don't have that kind of entitlement, to be able to slaughter a cow at will, and take an adrenal gland, which, when the natives did it, it was like, everybody in the tribe got a little chunk, and so there's a lot of vitamins in different parts of the animal too. And even raw milk has vitamin C, but that's not spoken of because that's sort of, you're still in dangerous territory there with Pasteur, but let's strike two. You're challenging pasteurization.
Oh, dear.
So really,
funny.
To close this up, this community dinner, I think community, connect, commune. And Monica had a little talk a couple of years ago about immunity is better in community, immunity better in community. And what were they doing? I just told the client that fear causes two things in the body: hypoxia and lowered immunity. And what were they doing around this, like their usual propaganda scheme? This goes all the way back to like over 100 years ago. I mean, the media has been like masterful in manipulating people into all kinds of problem reaction solution stuff. So right now, though, it's just that with the face of what's happened is it's all backfired because, the internet's made everything available to everybody now. And so like the health secrets that I used to really value 3 decades ago are sort of available to everybody now. But really what we're here to offer is it's the face-to-face connection. Like I've been hearing that some of the young generations having trouble even just having a phone conversation. There's so much anxiety, and they're used to text relationships. And I just can't even fathom that. Like, can't even get on the phone with somebody. Like, wow. So live interactions, if that's where people are at, then just realize like it's sort of a dream, and what's real is just so much better, and to get there, all it takes is just sometimes just a moment of vulnerability with somebody. It's really can be that fast. And that's what I'm here to offer is like, I've seen too many miracles to say otherwise. Just that moment of like, well, the divine comes in even where, because it's all grace in the end anyway. So why not pray for more grace? I tell people like, that's the root level prayer in my life for 30 years is like, hey, help me stay awake, please. Because when I'm asleep, I'm worthless. So I'm better awake. So, hey, grace, that's my order on the cook wheel of God, I call it. That's my order, please. And again, you got to keep asking, right? And so to end that, to end the recorded part, thank you for watching the recorded part of this dinner.